Could Dogman be a fire starter? Dear Scary Stories NYC, I grew up in Woodsfield in Ohio, which is about 120 miles from Columbus, but 100 miles from Pittsburgh in PA. We're closer to West Virginia than we are to Cincinnati, and so we sometimes have visits from creepy critters that might bypass much of the rest of the state. Woodsfield, Ohio is not a location very well known for Dogman. However, we had a rash of Dogman sightings right near me during my childhood for 1 year, and 1 year only, accompanied by a number of small fires, all of which were handled by locals and nearby fire departments before they got out of hand. I always wondered, as did some other people I knew, if the two were related. Were the Dogmen, either deliberately or accidentally, creating those fires? When I say 1 year, I guess I mean 1 season. It was late spring into early fall of that year. Since I was very young at the time, I'm not certain which year it was, but let's say somewhere between 1979 and 1982. I actually had my own sighting, which is still fresh in my mind as though it happened yesterday. And I'll tell you that at the end of this, since it happened just at the end of the entire period. Now, I don't believe there were actual wildfire issues on a grand scale that year, in Ohio or the nation. I had to call my dad on the phone and get him to help me with the timeline for this one, as well as filling in details that I never heard before, since I was so young back then. Dad's estimate is that it either happened in 1980 or 81. Apparently, the entire situation started in late spring of that year, when a family we'll call the Johnsons made the first sighting of the strange creature. They said they saw a big, reddish dog or a fox that stood up on its hind legs like a giant meerkat when it saw them. They shouted at the creature, waving their arms, until it left their property, but they were too scared to get closer than 30 feet due to the immense and unusual size of the thing. Later that evening, there was a fire in their backyard. Some of the trees were burning, but the family was able to put it all out with the aid of a fire hose and a bucket that they continually refilled from indoors. Nobody at the time linked the two stories, but they soon would begin to connect the dots. In fact, the family we're calling the Johnsons moved after there were a few more flash wildfires in the town. I think they were the first to put 2 and 2 together and realize that there was a creature who was doing some messed up stuff in that town during that summer. Some people call it a werewolf. I remember hearing other older kids mentioning the red werewolf, as in, I don't want to walk to the park that way. My cousin saw the red werewolf when he walked over there. Nobody ever said it was actually red. It's just that it was a reddish-brown color. Everyone knew what you meant when you said the red werewolf, though. Even I did. And I had not yet seen him. In my mind, though, he was a very big thing. My mother was extra careful about me that summer, which meant a lot less fun for me. I could never play out back unless she could also free the time to watch over me. In retrospect, she was smart, and those were good instincts she was following, but at the time, I just viewed it as a type of imprisonment and unfair punishment. That didn't mean that she hadn't succeeded in getting me thoroughly scared and paranoid about monsters lurking around every corner, because she had. I suddenly needed a nightlight in my room at night. I would scream when I saw shadows move, all that sort of stuff. I never used to be like that until the red werewolf was seen and the weird small fires kept starting. I don't think anyone meant the word werewolf in a literal sense. I don't think anyone thought he changed into a man at points or anything like that. My mother at the time told me they used that word because when it stood up, it looked like a werewolf from the movies. She insisted to me that it was really an animal, but a very dangerous one, that we needed to watch out for. Because of the name werewolf, though, it became harder for the neighbors to get the police to even show up when they called. They would openly tell 911 that the red werewolf was in their backyard, and then the cops would just put them on the crank list and never show up. Then, when the trees on their side of the house caught on fire a bit later, nobody would get their call, and they'd have to put the fire out themselves. Soon, most of our neighborhood was on the crank list at 911, and the red werewolf essentially ran the area however he felt. I'm not sure how wide an area I'm really talking about, but I know it was our block and the next one north of us at the very least. I mean to say the sightings were all around the region, but I'm not sure how many people were aware of this. My neighborhood friends and I all knew about it, and there were sightings behind or near half the houses by August. But some of the stories going around were supposed to have happened up to 100 miles away. There was a July 4th incident that we all heard about. An older kid I'll call Todd was setting off fireworks by himself that apparently he had stolen. This was why he was setting them off by himself. He was in the woods, and there are a couple of stories about where. The one I remember from when I was a kid was that he was in the woods by the Moose Lodge and the bowling alley on the eastern side of Woodsfield. I remember some people even calling the monster the Woodsfield Wolfman after that, although the red werewolf was what I mostly heard him called. So anyway, this guy we're calling Todd got arrested after he got caught running from a forest fire. The assumption was that he started it, and maybe he did, but that wasn't the story he gave. According to the tales I heard it back then, Todd claims he had already finished blowing up all his firecrackers long before the fire started. Todd claimed that the noise and smoke generated by his fun seemed to have annoyed a really tall guy covered in fur with a dog head. Supposedly he said it looked like Bigfoot married a German shepherd, which still makes me laugh when I think about it. So Todd said the Dogman started the fire, but when he was asked how, he didn't know how to answer. Quote, he just made it start burning, unquote, was not considered a legitimate answer. And we heard that Todd got thrown into juvie prison. When I ran into him a year or two later, I was surprised because back then I thought they never let you out once they threw you in. Probably the most repeated story I heard back then was supposed to have taken place in the Wayne National Forest, about 100 miles southwest of Woodsfield. The brother of one of the fathers on the block north of us took his family camping in the big forest down there. It's a great place to hike or camp, and he went back again after that, so don't let the story I'm about to tell you scare you off from going there. The family were toasting marshmallows and singing songs when the daughter in the family, the one with glasses, spotted that same so-called red werewolf lurking on the edge of their campground. The father got his wife and kids inside the big family tent they had brought there, and then he stood guard outside. He kept the campfire going, and he stared at the big Dogman, and it seemed to be a standoff. He was hoping to wear the creature down, or bore him until he went away to look for easier prey. Unfortunately, the creature had patience far beyond that of any human being, and the family's father found it harder and harder to keep eye contact going with the beast. He said he felt incredibly tired, and he decided to close his eyes for 1 second. When he opened them again, he was being shaken awake by a complete stranger, which had to be a terrifying moment. There were flames everywhere in the night, and his wife and kids were not inside the tent. The stranger explained that he and his camping partner were putting out the forest fire that he thought the father had caused, and that he should move away before he inhaled too much more smoke. The family's father was confused because he could not have started that fire. The campfire was out, so it had not caused the forest fire. Well, if it wasn't that, then what had caused it? The father remembered his stare down with the Dogman, then looked around, but could no longer see it anywhere. So if it had not been for those more professional campers who brought a fire extinguisher with them, that whole branch of that family tree might have been extinguished instead of the fire. This story, more than any of the others, set my part of the neighborhood on fire. The Dogman became more important to us than anything else going on at the time. It was the first topic in every conversation. I can't think of any other time that the conversation wasn't set by the news or TV, at least during that era. This was the only time I can think of when something so local and so unknown to the general public was the most important thing in the world to us. It's even possible that the police and press choosing to black out our very real crisis made it loom larger in our eyes. If the issues had been acknowledged and the cops had humored us by at least pretending to investigate, I bet a lot of people would have been a bit calmer. But the attitude that we were all making it up caused paranoia and suspicion to rule the day. And we all know how awesome it is when that happens, huh? So now let's get to my sighting, which happened when there were enough leaves on the ground that our backyard was covered with them. My parents, my older sister, and I all raked leaves one Saturday into the later afternoon. I was tossing a rake full of leaves onto the pile, which was by then up to my chin. Whoosh! The entire pile lit in flames as I was adding the leaves, and I had to pull back quickly to avoid going up in flames myself. I felt like my face was on fire, and I screamed. Once I had gotten a few feet back from the fire, I saw a big, hairy creature, taller than my dad, looking right at me through the smoke and the heat of the fire. It seemed like a dog, and yet it seemed like a monster, too. And I did not make the connection right away that this must be the red werewolf that people were talking about. I didn't know I was seeing it until the sighting was over. And even then, I at first laughed at the idea that I had seen the famous monster. Once it sunk in, of course, I bragged to all my friends about it and set myself up as an expert on the monster. I told this story over and over and over until it got old between Christmas and New Year's. I was the last person I knew who saw the creature that year, so that meant there hadn't been a sighting for over a month or more by New Year's. So let me give you the description that I bored so many people with in that 1 month when I was still very young. The creature looked like a costumed man to me when I first saw him. He was standing up like a man, and he was covered in fur. His head was like a dog or a wolf. I don't know about fox because the coloring was more like a dog or a bear. I saw him as brown, not red. I've had it explained that he had red highlights, but maybe I was seeing him in a different lighting or something. I thought his fur looked a lot like a big brown bear, to be honest. I mean, he wasn't a bear, his body shape was thinner and more humanoid. He looked like a human athlete with a big mask on. He even had hands and feet that were something like human hands and feet. I remember he had long, scary-looking claws on his toes, but I don't remember seeing claws on his fingers or hands. Of course, I wasn't looking for them. I was a kid seeing a wolf-headed man and being confused about it. My mother swooped in, picked me up, and started running away. Then, she threw her back out and I had to slowly help her get up and walk inside. The entire time, the big brown wolf-headed man watched the two of us. Every time I looked behind, he was still looking at me. He hadn't moved. He had just turned his head. I've heard some people say I'm lying because a dogman can only turn his whole chest, not just his neck. If that's so, then I saw something other than a dogman, because this guy turned his big dog head toward me, while his body stayed facing the same direction. My father told me that while I was helping my mother back to the house, he and one of the neighbors were screaming at the dogman to please go away. He just ignored them and watched me and my mother, according to Dad, until we were both inside. Then it was like the dogman suddenly noticed the two men trying to shoo him off the property, and he turned and bared his teeth at them. My older sister started spraying water on the burning leaf pile, and my father told her he wanted the leaves to burn. He hadn't started the fire, but we may as well let it go its course. Then he got an idea and grabbed a hose from my sister, aiming it at the dogman and putting it on the tightest stream possible. He says the dogman shut right up. He moved left and right to avoid the water. He seemed very unhappy about it. Now I find that fascinating because I've met a few people, not one, but a few, who told me they fired various kinds of bullets right at these creatures, and they got far less of a response than my dad is claiming to have gotten with a garden hose. Could part of this be exaggeration by my old man who knows I'm going to give this to you for the internet? Maybe, but he seems pretty adamant about it. I asked him again about this recently, and the only thing he wanted to add was to clarify that he was not saying that the hose hurt the dogman. He's saying that it annoyed and bothered the dogman enough to shut him up. So he wasn't harming the beast. He was just being a jerk to it so that it wouldn't want to be there anymore. Now obviously I will not suggest to you to do this to a real dogman if they come into your backyard, as some of them might get so angry that they'd eat you and your hose right up. But in this one particular case, according to my father at least, the creature decided it wasn't worth the effort to stick around. Different stories circulated about why the creature never came back after that. My sister and mother liked the idea that the hose had gotten the dogman wet. Then it went out into the forest, where it got down to an almost freezing temperature that night. In their opinion, at least back then, the dogman got sick and passed away after my dad hosed him. Dad would act like he agreed with them and joke around about how he was the dogman killer and so forth, but privately between the two of us, he had a different opinion. My father says he still feels that the dogman migrates, and that it migrates to different locations each year, almost never hunting the same grounds 2 times in a row. It will stay in one place until it starts to feel it can get better game elsewhere. Some of them might move in an easterly direction across the course of their lives, or maybe north, west, or south, but there must be an overall direction, or else the dogman would hit the same hunting grounds multiple times. According to Dad's theory, if the dogman is seen again near that house that he still lives in, it will almost certainly be a different dogman. And then if that happens, we should only expect it to be there 1 season before it, too, is gone, never to be seen in our region again. Maybe Dad's theory is true for Ohio, anyway. We don't seem to get as many dogmen as the states to our north and Pennsylvania to our east. Maybe we can notice these patterns, whereas other areas where the beasts are more common, people can think they're seeing the same one over and over and over, when it actually might be a new one each season, probably about the same age as the last one. I wonder if the creatures settle down when they mate, or if males keep moving and mate multiple times. How do regular, ordinary dogs do it in the wild? I don't actually know. And concerning the dogman which plagued us for that 1 season, what was the deal with fires springing up wherever he did? Could it have actually been a coincidence? Are there any other stories of dogmen possibly setting fires, or at least having them happen nearby? Is this something that anyone else has ever talked about before? Outside of the people from where I grew up, I mean. Come to think of it, I don't know the answer to a lot of questions about this creature. Such as, could Dogman be a fire starter? Our new EP, Jeff Underhill, got the power like a pneumatic drill. His membership is a big white pill. We hope our secret stories will give him a thrill. Please join me in thanking our newest channel member, Jeff Underhill, for making this episode possible. Jeff gets to see our secret uncensored Dogman stories, linked to in members-only posts on our community page. To find out how you can see all these secret episodes too, listen to our international TV spokesmongrel, Henry Lee Dogman, as he lays out the deets. Hank? Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos, or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after, I think, 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.